Just if you look at the shipping industry as a whole, you obviously have the tankers, you have the containers, you have the LNG and LPG. It seems like from the outside, it seems like there is something special drawn to the tanker industry that is almost like more dynamic, more fast paced, etc. Can you sort of tell people that are not that into shipping what separates the tanker market from the other markets in the shipping industry?
Yeah, and that's a very important point because a lot of people see shipping as shipping. So I have a lot of friends calling me today and say, "Wow, shipping is booming," and that's because they read an article about containers. And I said, "No, our business is pretty difficult at the moment. We had a very good year last year. Last year it was a disaster for everyone. No, not for us, but this year it is." So it's important to make the difference between the different shipping segments, and every single shipping segment have their own dynamics in supply and demand. So number of ships versus the number of cargoes that you need to transport. Now, if we look at the container vessels, it's an amalgamation of boxes. Today, modern ships, they can carry 24,000 boxes. And so the logistic behind it, because it's one thing to put them on the ship and to disembark it, but the entire supply chain where the container will be filled or where it will be emptied is part of the service that some of the biggest company wants to provide. So it is more sophisticated in a way that it requires, lot more than just the shipping element, i.e. the construction of the ship and the manning or the operation of the ship. And from that point of view, it's a very interesting market, but it's a market that is relatively stable unless you have a big crisis like a COVID crisis. After all, the goods needs to be moved. More and more goods are moved in containers. And so the name of the game is to follow the growth of the market. And from time to time, the market doesn't grow as fast as the fleet. And from time to time, the market grows faster than the fleet. And so you have ups and downs. And I think that this year is a little bit exceptional because there are many elements which have squeezed it. But so it is more stable than our markets. Then you have the gas market, which is a market of long-term contracts because the fleet is not that big. And gas is something that you can transport and store under very difficult conditions because it's a gas, so everything needs to be pressurized, everything needs to be on a pipe. When you think about the oil, well, you can store the oil in any container, in a truck, in a train, in a specific storage on land, and so it's a lot easier. So that's already a big difference, is that the gas market needs to be planned in advance, like a big train. If you think about where it is produced, where it's going to go, you need to think about every single point, and every single point is the responsibility falls on different people. But overall, it is also a more stable market because of the product that you're transporting. If you go to dry bulk, so dry bulk is more like coal, it's iron ore or different metals ore, and then of course all the grains or all the agricultural part. But that is probably on smaller ships. And this is a market that is probably the closest to a market, but nevertheless is relatively stable because you know that steel production is something that goes up and down, but overall it has a trajectory. And then in terms of food, it's the same. And people have, by definition, they need to eat every day. And so you have some stability there. Of course, the weather can influence the production and these kind of things. But it has ups and downs. It's more cyclical, like ours, but it doesn't go to the huge peak and huge trough that we have. And then you come to our market, and certainly the crude, because there's also the petroleum product after the refinery. But in terms of crude, what makes it very, very volatile, unpredictable, certainly seasonal, and seasonal because we tend to use more energy in the winter, as the majority of the people lives in the northern hemisphere. It is influenced by so many geopolitical and geographical factors. So geopolitical are the decisions taken by politicians, and you can see when there is a sanction, a regime that is being sanctioned, like at the moment Iran and Venezuela, or when there is a big dispute between the Americans and the Chinese, for instance, or the eruption of a war or civil war. The Middle East is not the most stable place, and nevertheless, it's where most of the oil is being produced. So you can see that many elements that are completely beyond your control are influencing your market. And then in terms of geographies, it is the case that weather events will influence this market tremendously, because a hurricane, the hurricane season, means that all the ships need to deviate, they will have delays. An earthquake can have a severe impact. A tsunami like the one that hit Fukushima means that Japan will then have to use much more oil, much more gas, potentially, and well, at that time, much more coal. So a lot of factors that influence our markets are unpredictable, but they happen all the time, and you never know when they're going to happen. And because the market is relatively big, but a tiny influence of 1%, 2%, 3% difference can make a big impact on the rates, means that it's very volatile. And then the last element is the market is very much exposed to the spot market. So it's not a long-term market, it's really one voyage after another. And that means that the earnings that you're going to have depends on every single time that you fix a ship. Fixing a ship means agreeing on a contract to lift a cargo and to transport this cargo from A to B. Every time you do that, it's a Dutch auction. So you have 2 or 3 ships that can do the service, and the guy will choose the cheapest one. Of course, he will have some qualitative criteria, some safety criteria, that's very important, but he will nevertheless choose the cheapest vessel. So the market is always going down when there's an oversupply, because there are too many ships bidding for cargo, and always going up when there's undersupply, because there are not enough ships and they want to make sure that they can transport their cargo.